I will now call to order the study session meeting of March 21st, 2022. Happy first day of spring. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the local government access channel 8 for Comcast subscribers, on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Here.
Councilmember Whitkovich.
Here.
Councilmember Hadamio.
Here.
Councilmember Duran Malika.
Here.
Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa.
Here.
Councilmember Goff.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 4 items on our agenda tonight. The first one is Sustainability Committee update. So Becky Smith, our planning manager, is here to introduce the item. Hi.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Leidy, Council. I'm Becky Smith. I'm the planning manager in planning and development, and I also am the staff liaison for the Northglenn Sustainability Committee. The Sustainability Committee has been in existence now for 1 year this month, and I'm joined tonight with Renata Trizawaldi, and she's going to present an update on what the committee has been up to and what they would recommend to you guys moving forward.
Yep, usually it just takes a couple.
Okay, it should be good to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you for the council members and mayor for having me in this evening.
Is it working? Do you see green or red?
Oh, hold on.
Yep, flip it to green.
There. Thank you. Now it's good.
I presented our priorities last year, but I would like to introduce briefly about the Sustainability Committee. And we were formed in March 2021 with 16 members. So far, we still have the 16 members, just some additional new members and inactive members. In this committee, we have co-chairs. So I was supposed to be with my co-chair, but she is super busy right now, so I'm the only one here. And this was the picture that was taken last year. That was us with some members. The vision of the Sustainability Committee is to creatively and thoughtfully utilize our resources, show pride in our community, and meet our present and future generations' needs without compromising the ecosystems on which we depend in order to create an exceptional quality of life for every generation. Our mission and purpose are to coordinate, to initiate, and to promote sustainability within the city. And our purpose is to advance and encourage environmentally sustainable practices and ideas within the city, collaborate with the city to continue to implement and update the strategies and goals in the sustainability plan, which will be our priority for this year. Another purposes are to provide recommendations and suggestions to City Council about laws, ordinances, rules, programs, and funding that promote sustainability, work in cooperation with other city boards, commissions, and committees to promote sustainability policies and programs, promote sustainability awareness at city events or at the request of interested individuals or groups, and conduct occasional community surveys to understand the local perspective on the sustainability plan and progress the community feels is necessary. We have 4 focus areas. First one is policies, programs, and awareness as identified in the city's adopted sustainability plan goal areas. 2, the committee will be responsible for recommending revisions, additions, and amendments to the sustainability plan. Each year, the committee will focus on 2 to 4 prioritized topics from the goal areas in the plan and will identify one of the topics as urgent to be addressed. And this evening, we will present 2 of the priorities. The last one is urgent topic areas can include those outside of the goal areas listed in the sustainability plan. Goal areas include arts, culture, and events, community education and civic engagement, sustainable economy, environment and public health, housing, human dignity, open space and land use, resource conservation, and transportation. In November last year, we had a poll for the committee, and we determined our focus, our priorities for 2022. And at that time, we had 9 members participated in the poll, and this is the result of the poll. We have 13 topics. It's similar to the 2021 priorities poll, but we added water, air, noise, and light pollution in the poll. And the top of the priorities are solid waste optimization and update the sustainability plan, which are the same as the priority poll that we did last year. So this indicates the committee's main interest and determination to promote these 2 areas. So we go into details to the priorities. In terms of solid waste, based on the study on solid waste optimization by the city, nearly 90% of single-family households' waste in the last 3 years went to landfills. So we already had a recycling program, but apparently this data shows that the recycling is still not optimum. It's not as expected. So we could still increase the numbers. And the problems with landfill disposals are including it generates methane gas. It's the toxic gas as well as the contributor to climate change. And it pollutes ground and water in the area, as well as to make the area surrounding unattractive. Even though Northglenn has no landfill, but we still send the waste somewhere in the U.S. and it's our nearby city. Therefore, it could affect the community as well as tourism. So in this regards, committee recommends 3 things. The first one is recycling and composting. Since we still have a lot of potential to increase the recycling and as well as composting. Therefore, it could reduce the waste that go to the landfill. And the second one is to promote reduce, repurpose, and reuse. Because if we don't reduce our waste production, the waste is still going to piling up, especially if we have increasing population and increasing consumption. It will never stop. So in order to make the recycling program effective, we also need to promote the less generation of waste, especially in the community behavior. And the third one, that we need data, because so far, as I learned, we only have the single-family waste data, since that's the only area that is controlled by the city. We don't have the data on the multifamily and businesses waste data. So in order to gain the data and to increase the effectiveness, we would like to recommend the city to adopt the policies to to require all private haulers to provide the data on how much the waste goes to the landfill or go to the recycling facility. The second priority that we would like to recommend is to update the sustainability plan. As you can see, we already had 9 goal areas, but climate change is still out of the areas. So we would like to strongly recommend to the city to focus on this area with two main focus on policies to help the city build resiliency to the biggest climate change risks and threats. And the second one is post-COVID-19 recovery plans that rebuild the economy and help people rebuild their lives in a green way. As we all are aware that the pandemic has affected the economy. And I think this is an opportunity for us to build back better. That's the term that we hear a lot nowadays, because in a lot of areas in the world now try to use this moment to not only to build back the economy back to pre-pandemic, but also to implement the green manners in the economy development. So I think this is our golden opportunity to implement the sustainable strategies in policies. And I would like to present you why we should adopt climate goals or climate action plans. This figure is taken from the IPCC report in 2022, the latest one. The IPCC found that the effect of climate change, the impacts of climate change, is certain, and it is at the global level. In some areas, as you can see, there are some positive and negative impacts. So it means climate change could impact negatively in some areas, but positively in other areas, such as it could also increase the harvest and crops in some areas because the temperatures is increasing or getting warmer. But in other areas, the warming weather could mean less crops and severe drought. And in North America, where we live, we will see some positive and negative impacts. But unfortunately, in Colorado, we see more negative impacts rather than the positive. And from that impacts, there are 2 major consequences that we should be aware of. The first one is in economic aspect, and the second one is in displacement. On the economic aspect, the latest Deloitte report said that there is 1.4 trillion US dollars total economic losses over the past 50 years in the United States due to climate change. And in the future, if there is no sufficient action to address climate change, we will suffer potentially 14.5 trillion US dollars. And climate change also caused people displacement, especially the internal displacement or displacement inside of a country. Globally, in 2020, there are around 30.7 million of new displacement, and 89% of the numbers came from extreme or caused by extreme weather events such as floods, landslides, and sea level rise. And 1.7 million from that number is in the US, where we experience failing dams in Michigan due to heavy rainfall and wildfires in several states, including Colorado. And on top of that, we also experienced COVID-19, which exacerbated the condition. There are several recommendations following the priorities that we agreed. The first one is to update the sustainability plan with carbon emissions and climate goals. Second, build carbon emissions and climate goals based on science and studies. Third, pursue climate goals with several target achievements. 4, incorporate the Northglenn Gas Inventory Report 2019. We already had the inventory report, and this could be a potential to cut some cost from implementing climate action plan. 5, focus on the emissions reduction plan on transportation, residential, and commercial, because based on that report, those are the main areas or the biggest emitters in Northglenn. 6, pursue EPC with renewable energy and energy efficiency goals in cities' facilities. 7, implement the risk and adaptation advisory report recommendations for Northglenn. And I think this is very important since adaptation purpose is to build resiliency for the city, for the community, and this should be implemented on par with the mitigation or reducing emissions. 8, plan for multi-emergency situations. And 9, rebuild the economy post-COVID-19 with low-carbon development measures. As a wrap-up, solid waste and climate goals have been consistently on the top, which is the committee's emphasis on the priorities for this year. And we understand that adopting climate action plan could be costly, but it could not only be the burden for the city. And I am volunteering myself to help Becky to see any funding opportunities from the federal or from the nation. And in 2022, the Sustainability Committee has some plans such as podcast series, webinar, and summer campaign at the city events and block party. So we would like to welcome all of you to listen to our podcast probably and to attend our campaign too. So thank you for the opportunity. Any questions?
Well, I'm looking for hands, just if anyone has any questions. I'm also looking at the agenda, and it seems that the top 3 items might go together in some way. So, yes,
They do.
Okay. So in case there's questions, Mayor Pro Tem Wolford can start.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you. I have been so impressed with your work and Jen's work in leading the Sustainability Committee. And it's really exciting to have you all back in front of council and hear that the podcast is moving forward. And it's been fun to join some of the meetings and hear all about the work and the conversations that are happening because they've been really intentional and really focused on what we can do in Northglenn to have the biggest level of impact. So thank you for your continued work. Thank you for being here. And I'm really excited for the next couple of presentations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Walker?
Hi there. I'm just curious on number, it'd be, I guess, bullet point number 3. You talk about adopting policies that will require the data from contractors. I was curious, has there been any studies on what this would cost the businesses or how much the contractors would charge for this data? Has there been any, have you guys looked into that at all?
So it would likely be a policy where we would require haulers that work in our city to get licensed or registered with the city. We haven't talked about what that fee would look like to register with the city. I'm sure it wouldn't be that much. And then what we would be asking them for is for either annual or biannual reporting on some level as far as what the tons of waste they are taking to the landfill or the recycling facility is, so that we know what's being diverted and what's going directly to the landfill.
Okay.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Hi, I just have a couple questions that some of the residents might have. So which recycling plant does Northglenn utilize, and can Northglenn residents drop off, say, like electronics or other commonly recycled items there?
Okay, that's probably could be answered.
Hi, I'm Rob Weber, the Operations Manager. Good evening, Council,
Hello.
Mayor. So we use the MRF, which is the recycling plant in Commerce City that's operated by Waste Management. And that's where our recycling goes for our curbside pickup and also our recycling for our recycling center out at M&O right now. So we drop that off ourselves. We participate with Adams County for electronics recycling. I believe that's twice a year. And then we try to cooperate with Adams County and Thornton on other drop-offs for like chemicals. In the last 2 years, we've also done a paint collection out at M&O that we work with a non-for-profit group that comes out and sets up in the parking lot, and then they accept paint and all that. So that's what we're trying to do, what we can to, make sure that we're trying to capture as many of the recyclable materials as we can in Northglenn.
Very good, that's great. And I'm an artist, so I recycle a lot of paint when
Yeah.
yeah, when it gets bad. So another couple questions. So what are the most commonly properly recycled items, and what are the most incorrectly recycled items? Just for people that I know, I recycle a ton. I know some people that are probably recycling things that maybe they shouldn't.
What we get the most of is cardboard is the easiest for us. It's easiest for the MRF to separate out. Probably the thing that is food containers cannot be recycled, so they get thrown out a lot. And that's a lot of our contamination that we get. We get about a 10% contamination rate on what we get, and so we do get a surcharge for that. I think it's $6 a ton right now from the recycle center. So whatever they're gonna pay us, they reduce that by $6 a ton on whatever our recyclables are that we can get revenue from. They reduce that by the $6. And so when we open the new recycling center, we hope that that will help reduce that contamination rate, and that we should see that contamination revenue go up and not be kind of penalized for having the contamination rate that we do. Some of the things are very difficult for us are glass, light bulbs, things like that. They're typically normal trash. Most people throw them into normal trash. We could collect glass. It's very difficult because it's messy, and it's, you have to get a lot and you have to break it up before you send it. So that makes it very difficult to collect that as well. We do collect oil and things like that as well, and we burn that. We have an oil burner that we heat one of the buildings out at M&O with. So I would say that it's not so much it's difficult, it's just the contamination rate gets high because people aren't conscious of what they're throwing in certain containers. And then when they bring it to the recycling center, we're hoping that by having a separate container out there, that they will use that for trash, and the recycling will go into the appropriate bin that we have. And we'll have somebody out there that's on site, not all the time, but a lot of the times, to help people know where they have to put the right stuff.
Okay, great. And are plastic water bottles and plastic bags from stores, are those recyclable?
The plastic bags are not, water bottles are.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mullica?
Yeah, quick question. So, and it's kind of a follow-up from what you were going on, Rob. So, but it leads into what you guys were talking about, your 2022 priorities. So solid waste optimization. Do you guys have a goal contamination rate you'd like to get to? Or how have you thought about, how do you put metrics behind something like that?
So I would say it's less around a contamination goal and more around a diversion goal. So we really want to reduce waste that's going into the landfill.
Okay.
And I believe our goal was in the sustainability plan, and don't quote me, but I think it was 23% by 2023. Now, that plan was adopted in 2018, and we've learned that that was too ambitious.
Okay.
It's really hard to move the needle with
Yeah.
waste. And so that's one of the items when we update the plan we'd like to revisit, to put a realistic plan in place, but also look at additional ways beyond recycling that we can divert waste. And so that's really getting into the different Rs, the reuse, reduce. et cetera. So.
All right, well, that's really helpful. And then just timeline, so you're looking at possibly by the end of this year, having updated that sustainability plan by setting the carbon emissions and climate goals. And then so council would probably see it probably by the end of this year or next year, are you thinking?
In our perspective, it should be done right away, immediately. So
Okay.
hopefully, it could be adopted by this year. And on top of that, we would like to promote this, so we could help with finding any opportunities with this.
Okay. Well, it would be nice, actually, if, I was just thinking about it, if we could have it before the budgeting happens, right? If there's money that we need to be talking about assigning to these particular priorities, it would be good that council knows about them so that we could, you know, earmark some money for sure. So, thank you so much for all your hard work.
Councilmember Brown?
Sorry about that, Madam Mayor. Is Rob still there?
He is.
I was
Rob,
thinking
settle
about
this.
running out the back door, but I didn't.
Nice try.
Settle the debate for us. Well, for me in my house, caps on or caps off?
Caps can stay on.
Caps can stay
I
on.
don't
Yeah.
know. Waste
Stay on.
Management said.
Waste
We've never,
Management
we've
said-
never received anything from Waste Management that says that we should be removing the caps, so they're expecting them to be there. So you can either leave them on or throw them in with the bottle. Either way is fine.
Liners of, you love these questions. Liners of cereal boxes.
Those waxy paper ones,
Yeah.
you could leave them in there, but they're not gonna get recycled. They're gonna get tossed. That's not recyclable.
Okay, and then one last thing at the bottom of the King Supers bags, it does say that they're recyclable, so they're really not. Well, they have the triangle.
I know that our MRF does not recycle those. They blow them
Okay.
out. I've been out to the site and they get blown out with a blower. So if they collect them, I'm not sure what they're doing with them, but they do not, package them up and recycle them.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, do they? Oh, Becky said grocery stores are collecting them,
Oh, okay.
but I don't think that Waste Management is recycling them. They might be somebody else that does that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Great presentation tonight.
So Councilmember Brown, that's a debate in my house as well, so I Googled it. And apparently I was wrong. I thought Waste Management told me to take the lids off. But it says, clean and dry the containers, then put the cap back on before tossing in the bin. So there's a lovely page on the Waste Management site, because I may have to refer back to that later.
Yeah, me too.
Doing it
Thank you.
wrong. Mayor Pro Tem Wolford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had two additional questions that came up as my colleagues asked questions. And the first, this may be for staff, is do we have a sense of when we might see the waste optimization study session come back? I know it hasn't been scheduled yet, but do we have a approximate date? Because it seems like there are a lot of questions and interest around recycling, and I'm sorry, Brooke.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
We're trying to figure out where we can put it on the council study session docket, but I will tell you, one of the things, because so much time has transpired since we kicked this thing off, because we actually had a study session primer 101, and in that primer 101, council gave direction which shaped the scope and nature of this project, that we are going to recommend that this is possibly a two-step exercise where we would do because we have new council members and so much time has taken place, is that we would present the primer and then the follow-up presentation. The one thing I want to also just stress as a lead-in for this to kind of seed plant is that this waste optimization study is the study. We discuss next steps, but this is not A to Z comprehensive, because I will tell everybody is that there are challenges with this subject that are going to need a lot of thoughtful deliberation by council to really understand the direction of this. But we do have it. It's in the can, ready to go. We just need to get it scheduled. So we'll be working on that here shortly.
Awesome, that's great. And then how, is that something that you're envisioning working with the Sustainability Committee on?
Of course.
Before it comes to council? Okay.
Yeah.
And then second question, it's more of a process piece, but when we talk about establishing some of the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, is that something that you all are envisioning the Sustainability Committee will take a crack at and then bring back to council? Or are you thinking that you want council direction and then Sustainability Committee works to establish like the tactics and the strategies for reduction?
What we had talked about at our last committee meeting was actually following the state's goals, at least for this year, since we don't have a climate action plan currently in place. And so we would look at that and then some of the strategies that we're currently working on, as well as other ones that we could do that would reduce emissions for this year, and then possibly amend them depending on what we do in the future.
Awesome, thank you.
I don't see any more hands for this portion. I just want to echo Mayor Pro Tem, thank you so much for being here and for sharing that information with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, climate action planning is next.
So you get to hear from me again, but I think I have to get back. Okay. All right, so thanks for having me again. Becky Smith, Planning Manager, and here tonight presenting on climate action planning. This was brought to staff, I believe, based on a discussion that happened during the 2022 budgeting process. Climate action planning got brought up, but not everybody really knew what it was or if it was something that was important to the city council. So staff was asked to bring back a presentation that just sort of provides the nuts and bolts of what climate action planning is. So the purpose tonight is to cover the items bulleted here. Really, the first few are just to do some level setting to make sure we're all on the same page with what we're talking about. And then I'll get into really more of what does it mean for Northglenn, what is the climate action plan, and what does it do. So I'll start with the greenhouse gas effect. Basically, the Earth is surrounded by a thin layer of gases called greenhouse gases. When sunlight hits the Earth, the light is reflected and it becomes heat, and the gases trap the heat, which makes the Earth inhabitable. So it's a natural event. It's always happened as long as the Earth has existed. However, global warming is being caused because more emissions are going into the atmosphere, and those emissions are being put into the atmosphere based on human activities. And so some of the human activities that we know about, such as driving cars, burning, wildfires is a contributor. Industry contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. And so what's happening is as more of these greenhouse gas emissions go into the atmosphere, it's locking in more heat, causing global warming. In 2019, the city actually did a greenhouse gas inventory to figure out where the city's emissions are coming from, and we did a citywide inventory as well as a government operations. As you can see from the citywide community emissions, really just over 2.5% of the city's emissions come from government operations. Most of our emissions come from transportation. A large part of that is going to be I-25, which isn't totally within our control. But as you can see, we do have a lot of emissions coming from residential, which would be using electric and gas, as well as commercial uses. And then when you break down our government operations, the biggest contributor is our waste and water treatment facilities, and that's because they take a lot of energy, a lot of electricity to treat, do those process treatments. So now that we covered greenhouse gases, I'll get into climate. Climate is just the average weather in a place over many years. The climate is changing based on global warming. And so the big difference between climate change and global warming is that over time, the long-term changes in climate, including average temperature and precipitation, are shifting. But then climate change is also defined by extreme weather events. So the type of weather events, the frequency, the duration, the intensity of weather events. So that could include heat waves, droughts, hailstorms, anything that is sort of considered extreme and unusual. And then global warming is just the increase of the Earth's average surface temperature due to buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So Renata actually covered this really well in her presentation, but there are a lot of global impacts that we know about from climate change, and that includes sea level rising, and this is happening at an increasing pace. We know that glaciers are melting, permafrost is thawing. In North America, our snowpack is going down, and our storms are becoming more intense. In Colorado, this is definitely impacting us because we know that our precipitation is being affected, especially from snowpack. Since the 1950s, our snowpack that's measured in April at different monitoring sites throughout the city has decreased by 20 to 60%. And so that lack of water is actually affecting water availability as well as agriculture. It may actually affect how agriculture works. So farmers may have to move to more dry land agriculture, which could reduce the crop yields by almost 50%. We all know wildfires has been an issue the last several years. Increased temperature is also opening up pests to our forest, and so there is more invasive species or just species that are able to attack our forest. And then there's also a human health consequence. So we're experiencing more extreme hot days, which can lead to stroke and dehydration, as well as trapping more ground level ozone, which leads to smog and can impact our breathing. So Northglenn actually did a study in 2018 when we did our sustainability plan, which is called the Risk Advisory and Adaptation Report, which zones in specifically on risks that Northglenn faces due to climate change. And those included drought, groundwater flooding, rainstorms, extreme hot days, severe wind, hail, and then changing seasonal patterns. And one thing that, when I was going over the presentation with Renata, that she really wanted me to emphasize is that a lot of these risks could come with pretty high property damage costs as well as infrastructure costs. So what are municipalities doing? Many are doing climate action plans, which is a tool for engaging communities in the work of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to unavoidable local impacts of climate change. So a climate action plan is basically a detailed strategic framework for measuring, planning, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and related climatic impacts. I'm going to cover each of these bullets in more detail because what I did was break it into different steps that we would go through if we were to pursue a climate action planning process. So the first step is really to determine your baseline. That's something that I think the city's already done and something that I think we could use if we do decide to pursue a climate action plan. We, in 2019, conducted both an energy audit through the city's energy action plan with partners in energy, as well as we completed the community-wide and city operations greenhouse gas emissions inventory. The next step is to set the preliminary goals. So you would want to set greenhouse gas reduction goals, targets, and timeframes. These are long-term plans with long-term goals that you measure over time. Typically, they're expressed as a % reduction of energy consumption or greenhouse gas emissions by a certain year. And the plan really helps you to prioritize actions that can help you to achieve those percentages. Some climate action plans just go in and say we're going to achieve a reduction of X amount by 2050. Some of them will say we're going to reach net zero by 2050, but in the interim, we've got these other goals that are less ambitious. Step 3 is really to set strategies that help you to achieve those percentage goals. So I've just included some examples of what could be included in a climate action plan, but that would be determined as we go through the process. There would be both short-term goals that might be considered low-hanging fruit, as well as longer-term goals that really help us make a big impact in greenhouse gas reductions. And then the plan would model the strategies so that you know how much reduction you can expect from each action that you would be taking, so that as a government you can prioritize the actions that have the greatest impact at the lowest cost, or that you understand what the investment is that you're making, what the impact will be to the greenhouse gas emissions. Climate action plans also contain a resiliency component. So again, looking at what are our biggest risks and where do we need to improve our infrastructure or set policies or look at techniques that would protect us from certain events that we're at that are likely to happen in the future due to climate change. So some of this could be looking at our communication response plans to get the word out to residents if something's happening. Some of it might be upgrading stormwater systems and stuff like that. And then the sixth step is monitoring, because a climate action plan is really a living document. It's never really done. You keep tracking it. You keep checking to see where your emissions are based on new scenarios. There could always be a situation too that increases your emissions. A new industry comes into your city or different aspects. So you do have to update it over time so that you know the progress that you're making towards your goal. And then the last component, which is sort of new, climate action plans used to be more of a technical document that didn't happen with a lot of public engagement. But over the last few years, public engagement has become more of a primary focus of climate action plans. And that's because actions aren't going to be successful unless you have buy-in and you're inclusive of your community. Climate change can exacerbate existing challenges for residents, and climate threatens public health and employment. So that's why a lot more communities have been engaging their residents and stakeholders a lot more through these planning processes. So when I was asked to do the presentation, I was also asked to explore the cost of a climate action plan. And so I reached out to some sustainability consultants that I know, and the average cost is about $150,000 for a climate action plan. That includes several factors. So the reason the cost has gone up is because of community engagement has become a primary component for a lot of communities. So that's an area where we could dial back depending on what we are wanting to do if we decide to move forward with a climate action plan. Modeling is going to be the other big one that impacts the cost. So it will be determined by how ambitious the goals are and how many activities or strategies you need to model in order to achieve those goals. And another area that I think we could actually see some savings is, since we already have the 2019 greenhouse gas emissions report and energy audit, I think we could use those, because I don't think we've had significant enough changes in our community that would change the data that we got from those reports. So we wouldn't have to do that all over again. Depending on council's direction, if this is something council wants staff to move forward with, I would just recommend moving it or having it be considered with the 2023 budgeting process, just based on staffing resources and other things. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that also when Renata and I talked about this, she did want me to plug that this plan could help us to see both quantitative and qualitative savings based on the resiliency aspect of being more prepared for climate change. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Brown?
Hey, Becky, I know we have the the report from 2019, is that one that they normally do every 4 years? Or that we would do every 4 years?
The greenhouse gas inventory?
Yeah.
I would say most places do probably every 10 years.
Oh, really?
Does that sound right to you?
I don't
I
know.
think it really depends on how many actions your community has taken, on if it's worthwhile to do all that modeling and inventory analysis again. It wouldn't be one that I would recommend updating at this time, just because we haven't changed that much.
And the average $150,000, the public engagement modeling required to achieve actions needed, that is what costs, that's what the 150,000 would be for? Or,
The 150,000 would be for the entire plan, but those are the two components that will impact the cost the most. So depending on the amount of public engagement that a city wants to do, will really impact how much it costs, as well as the amount of strategies that need to be modeled.
So it could be more.
It could be more.
is this something that we would be looking at bringing in a consulting firm to kick off the conversations? Yes, I see your head.
Yes, yeah. We don't have the staff expertise to do this type of process, especially when you get into the modeling aspect of it. There's a lot of technical knowledge that's required to figure out how different policies and strategies will reduce those emissions.
Okay. And that would be part of that 150, or would that be additional?
That would be part of the 150, give or take, depending on how we want to create a scope of work if we want to move forward.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mullica.
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I had, I really like this idea, one, because I feel like it could give us the information we need to make smart policy decisions for Northglenn moving forward. So I feel like this is what we've just kind of been missing over the past couple of years as we've been kind of kicking around this conversation, and how do we approach, I guess, better climate policy as a city. One of the things I did have a quick question on is timeline. What do you see? How long would something like this take? It seems like a really comprehensive.
That's a great
Look.
question. I didn't ask the consultants about that. I
Okay.
would guess it would take a year.
Okay.
And I think that timeline would also depend on the amount of public engagement, because when you start adding in public engagement, you do significantly increase the timeline of these types of projects as well.
And then you said that other cities are doing things. Do you know if other cities around us are doing this as well? Like
Yeah.
Westminster and Thornton specifically?
So I'm pretty sure Westminster does have a climate action plan that they've already adopted. I don't know if Thornton has one. I don't think they do. If you look at a lot of like the Boulder County
have some.
municipalities, I would say that most of them probably have a climate action plan, as well as Denver, Golden. So there are a lot of communities in the Front Range that have done this already.
Well, because one of the things I'm thinking of is, like so many of our problems, like, and issues that we're trying to tackle, this isn't going to be a Northglenn issue. So what type of regional, like, work can we do together? And how can this help? Like, how can we pair our study up with Westminster's and maybe Broomfield's or whoever else around us who's doing this work? And how can we come up with some type of, regional goals? I mean, that would be like a longer term thing, but I would like to see that happening. And then when it comes to stakeholders, is this, businesses and residents just in Northglenn? Are other kind of regional communities engaged, or how does that engagement work? What have we seen in other
I
areas?
would think it would be mostly stakeholders that are Northglenn, because the decisions or the strategies are going to impact Northglenn businesses and residents the most. But I definitely always think it's important to also engage with the county, engage with Tri-County or Adams County Health Department, depending on when moving forward, as well as regional agencies like that.
So how would you see, so like, this is gonna be a good chunk of money, 150,000. would this have staff oversight, or do you see that the sustainability committee could be part of kind of the oversight of this project? And if so, are we bringing people to the table like Excel, or other types of businesses like that are really important to us?
So I haven't given a lot of thought to all of the
Okay.
stakeholders yet. I would think we would want Excel at the table because they're going to be critical to achieving our carbon emissions goals as they green their energy production. I would think the Sustainability Committee would want this project, but I can't speak for them. So, but I would imagine we would be
Yeah.
working through that committee with the staff manager of the consultant.
Because one of the things I'm thinking of is if there's like a steering committee that is assigned to this project and this money, not only for oversight, but just to make sure that we're getting all the appropriate voices at the table. Because we want the biggest bang for our buck, right? We want to make sure that we're getting the most perspectives to the table. So, and including people who could potentially lose their jobs because we are moving towards more renewable energy. So like having, an individual like that be part of the board, Excel Energy at the table, Tri-County Health Department, or whatever health department looks like in the future at the table, all of those pieces, because I feel like, that gives us a better perspective, because you have to remember Northglenn is mostly a blue collar community. And so a lot of those Northglenn resident jobs could potentially be put at risk because of, the way that policy's being moved forward. So we need them at the table, and we need their thoughts and ideas on this policy as well, so that we could all move forward together. But like I'm picturing just a really diverse kind of steering group that could help us really navigate this really complex problem, and really smart people who, I'm not the smartest when it comes to climate policy. There's so much I have to learn on it. But, having a good group of voices at the table, I think could be really helpful, as well as I think council, perhaps maybe a council liaison to this particular project, I think would be helpful as we navigate, because it is very complex. We've struggled as a council to have these conversations and to formulate a policy around this. So I feel like we need to have like a better plan of attack, if you will. All right, I'm done. Thanks.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you. I think, Mayor, that you had said earlier that the first three items on our agenda were related. And so I just kind of want to circle back to that because, if we have a broader umbrella of the environment, it would cover the solid waste problems that we're talking about, recycling and all that, and also this climate action plan. So I just, I mean, there probably are some good reasons why we've got this with separate names and separate categories and maybe separate groups of people working at it, at these two, topics that we had listed here. But I do see them as really connected. And so I hope whatever kind of committee or oversight group or whatever that, or whoever it is, that there's a lot of cross communication on these issues. Because as we're communicating to our residents, and as we are trying to get public input on the decisions that we make, I think that that they could certainly combine strategies, or at least inform people in the same ways, or through the same podcasts, or whatever, however we want to do it. That things that would be good for our climate, or things that might affect our climate and the environment we live in, are also related to things like recycling and how much goes in the landfill and that kind of stuff. So it's not really a question or anything, but just something to kind of put out there.
Great. Mayor Pro Tem Wolford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm obviously very excited and passionate about climate, so I'm gonna try and pace myself, friends. I'm gonna pace myself. Couple of things. So one is I really do appreciate what Councilmember Goff just said, in that the top three items that are on our agenda tonight are all connected in some way or another to climate. I think a lot of the other work that we may not have necessarily identified as being under this bucket of work there are a lot of other things that are connected. So say, for example, we've talked a lot about building codes, right? We've talked about doing a net zero city hall. All of that is also connected into climate. The recycling, the waste diversion program that we've done during the summer months at some of our events, right? So the composting, I think, is I may be totally messing that up, but some of the composting work that we've done as well, all of this is interconnected, right? The amount of time and money that we're spending in our parks and trying to keep our green spaces green, it's all super interconnected. So I'm excited that we're finally having this conversation about building out a plan and what that could look like for Northglenn, because it does, it touches so much of what we do. As far as what a number of other communities are doing with plans, I would say almost a large majority of the folks at the Colorado Communities for Climate Action group do have climate action plans. And so I think that that organization, as we move forward, will be a wealth of information for us as we think through different approaches and different strategies, but also kind of level set in terms of looking at what some of our peers are doing to, fight climate change and actually take some action. And so I, again, think that they'd be a really great wealth of knowledge. And I know that we've had the conversation in the past around, we only have so many staff members available to do this work. We only have a certain amount of capacity. And so one thing I did want to bring forward to council that I just learned about, the Colorado Energy Office reached out to me on Friday and shared that they have a grant program. Specifically, it's called Civic Spark. And they're essentially, they've asked Northglenn to apply, but what they do is if we partner with them and go through this process, they will provide a fellow that can work on climate resiliency and climate action for up to 11 months for a $29,000 match. So they're covering absolutely everything else. So that could potentially be a way in which we could move ahead with some of this work, identify somebody who potentially, right, we don't want to lock this person in, but if this person works for us, this could be a shoe-in for the future in 2023 when we add that additional FTE to do some of this climate action work. So I'll share that information with Heather and Brooke and Becky, but wanted to at least put it on y'all's radar as something that is out there and something that we are being pushed to consider. Additionally, back to the conversation around stakeholders, I think absolutely Excel as well as United Power should be at the table when we start having these conversations, because Excel is, there's a lot there, but they've worked very, very closely with the city and county of Denver to help them reach their goal of powering their community with 100% clean renewable energy by, I think it's going to be 2040. Or possibly sooner. I may be off on that date. And so I think they have to be a part of this conversation. And to Councilmember Mollica's point, we do need to have a conversation about impacted workers. And in particular, our union workers as well. And so know that there are a lot of conversations that are happening locally as well as statewide in terms of how the state is going to be putting forward policy as well as funding to aid in a just transition, right? So ensuring that workers and communities are made whole and not left to just bear the burden of losing that industry, right? Because that's something that we don't want to see as local electeds, as community members. We don't want to see the people that have chosen to make their lives here with us have to move because they've lost their livelihood. And so there's a lot of work that's happening here. And I guess the last thing I would just say is, you are always going to hear this from me, but I would rather see us move forward sooner rather than later in putting out an RFP and figuring out how much is this actually going to cost for us to be able to do this work intentionally and in the long term. And so I guess from my perspective, I don't want to wait until 2023 because there is so much work to do. And I don't think that moving forward with an RFP and gathering the information we need to move forward is going to be a bad thing when we think about all of the ways in which climate impacts our bottom line here at the city and how much and impacts our general fund as well. So I will stop there and just say thank you. That was excellent, Becky, and I'm interested in what my colleagues have to say.
They're very quiet now, so.
I know.
Councilmember Brown.
Heather, did we put anything into the budget for 2022 as far as say it for me. My mouth is not working. Thank you. I have a few words I can't say, and apparently that's one of them today.
So we don't have a sustainability coordinator budgeted in the 2022 budget. We have it programmed in our 5-year staffing plan for 2023. Based on council's last discussion about the ideas that you all came up with, I made a commitment to, based on council direction, bring it forward as part of the 2023 city budget process. I will say, if council wants to do things sooner, we can certainly evaluate that fellow program. It's not going to be enough, I can tell you that. The work that Becky's doing is incredible, and we have so much going on. If we were in a situation where we didn't have new city hall design and a few other projects, it would look a lot different for us, workload-wise. But I would say I'd need to come to you, and you need to fund a sustainability coordinator mid-year.
Mayor Pro Tem, I have a question for you.
Shoot.
You had mentioned putting an RFP out. What do you envision that RFP being for? Just budget purposes? Because RFPs are not fun.
I mean, it doesn't have to be an RFP. I don't pretend to know the exact process that staff goes through to accept proposals from consultants that may help us move this work forward. So I would leave that to Becky and Brooke to figure out how to move forward. But what I would
It
like
would
to
be that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean,
That's our procurement process, so.
excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. The only thing that I'm concerned about is just the vagueness of it right now, but I know that'll be all ironed out. The money, budgeting the money to get it in before 2023 with all the things that we have going on. Oh my God, she's saying stop spending money. I'm concerned. I'm not totally against it, but I'm just concerned. Thank you.
Well, and to piggyback on that, Councilmember Brown, so we did have a conversation through the prioritization of moving the sustainability coordinator to the 2023 budget. And I think in response to Mayor Pro Tem's recommendation, I would just want to remember that and put it at the top of our brains as we go into the budgeting process, because we know we're going to have to possibly make harder decisions about what we really can afford versus what we would like to afford. So yeah, excellent. Councilmember Malika.
I think it's just, I have a point of clarification, because now I'm a little confused. So, Becky, this climate action plan, are you looking at getting this started this year prior to having the new sustainability coordinator in place? Or what,
So
where's the timeline at?
the purpose of the presentation tonight was really for informational purposes, and then for you guys to give staff direction on if you want us to pursue a climate action plan. It would be my recommendation, if you want to pursue a climate action plan, that we have more conversations about it as far as what components you really want to see in that plan, so that we put out an RFP that covers the public engagement components and the modeling components. And I would say the 2023 budgeting process is when you would discuss the budget number for that. But that's discussion for you guys.
But we couldn't move forward on a climate action plan until we have an FTE to support that? Is that the discussion?
Well, I would say my advisement to council is it's going to be a heavy lift.
Okay.
So if you say, no, we really want this, we will have to reprioritize some other things. So you got to take into consideration, we still have the waste optimization work to fully execute on. A sustainability coordinator would help speed things up. We can take a look at the fellow program, But having managed interns or fellows, you have to manage them, right? We have to be realistic about our expectation of what level of work that individual can provide to us. Not to say there wouldn't be value, there could be value. So we can certainly look at that program. Becky, I don't recall the percentage of your time that's dedicated to sustainability work. I think the key thing for council to think about is if you want to do more, we can do more with the sustainability coordinator and consistently more. Becky's time is divided between sustainability and all of the other planning activities and management of planning staff that she has on a day-to-day basis. So certainly the other stuff ebbs and flows based on volume of development projects within the city. But there's also, I mean, she's done a fabulous job, as I've mentioned, but there's also that level of expertise and that additional skill set that she's openly said, I don't have this. You know, we could bring somebody on. And it's been offset with the great work of the Sustainability Committee and our community members that have stepped forward and helped contribute. So I think it's not a one-size-fits-all, it's a collective approach. And we've been having this conversation about the addition of a sustainability coordinator for, since I've gotten on board. Before I got on board, and then once I got on board, they said, we need this position. And then it's become a matter of, you know, how quickly does council want to move forward with these initiatives? I think council's in a space where we hear your support for this work different than, say, maybe a couple of years ago. And so, you know, I would caution us to say we could commit to issuing an RFP, actually getting started with a climate plan this year without additional help. So there, I mean, maybe there's some other alternative through some type of consulting service, but again, that's going to cost money. And so that would be 2 supplemental asks from the general fund reserves, one for the actual plan itself, 150,000 plus any type of service to help us get there.
All right, that just helps me manage expectations and where this work is actually going and the timeline of what you're talking about. So, you know, if you said it takes maybe about a year for this type of work to be, you know, done, and we don't start until 2023, you know, we're not looking at 2024. So it just helps me put it in my brain of how long this timeline might look like. So, and I hope it gives us all an idea of like, when we commit to this, we're also potentially committing to additional staff support, you know, for these types of initiatives moving forward. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Heather, do you remember what the salary was that you had in the budget?
I have my sheet right in front of me. Or do you want to do it by memory book?
This position right now has been rated at a senior planner tier position.
99,808 with benefits.
Yep, with benefits. So probably starting salary range in the low to mid 70s.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
I just wanted to also mention to council, because the one thing I don't want council to, when we talk about managing expectations, you know, Becky with Excel Energy, this FEEP activity, the stretch codes, Becky over the last 2 or 3 years has undertaken more than a dozen different initiatives that all will backfill into a climate action plan. And quite frankly, we're doing the work that the climate action plan would otherwise flag and address. So I don't want it to feel like we're not accomplishing anything by not getting this started sooner than later, because we're already executing on many components of what would otherwise be policy directives out of the comprehensive, or out of the climate action plan. So just want to mention that, because we are doing a lot with very, very little resources, and the Excel Energy program, the Partners in Energy, has been very instrumental on us being able to move things forward without a lot of huge capital expense. A lot of human capital though. And so just want to emphasize that. Thanks.
Great.
Councilmember Brown.
Sorry, Cammy was a little out of control right there for a few minutes. I do apologize. Brooke, I want you guys to know that I don't think that you're not overstretched as far as staff. I know that we have some really big projects in the work, so I get that. Be quiet, okay? Sorry. You almost heard me go all old school on her. Anyhow, I am not in favor at this time of pushing it forward. I'd like to revisit it after in 2023, maybe the beginning of the year. But at this point, we have so many big things going on that I can't see it. Excuse me. I apologize for that. I can't explain it. So those are my thoughts on it. That I just don't think right now we can make a decision to take a coordinator. Even I share Heather's concerns about bringing an intern in because I've had several interns in my business life, and it's more work for me than having somebody who is qualified for the role. But if it's something the rest of my council people feel like doing, I could stand behind it. But I think it turns out to be more work for our staff than than being helpful.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. I agree with Councilmember Brown. I think it's something that we need to move forward soon. I think, adjusting the 2022 budget is probably not necessary. But making sure that it's at the forefront of our minds when we're talking about the budget for 2023. Silent. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks.
Sounds like Rob Weber, Public Works Operations Manager, talking about fleet electrification.
Good evening again. So the FEEP is the Fleet Electrification Advisory Program, and we're partnering with Xcel Energy on this. We've been talking about it since last October. I just want to give you an update. I know you probably have all seen the timeline and where we are. I talked to our head mechanic today, Jim Allen, and we have about 10 vehicles left to put the GPS systems on. We were hoping to be started today, but we did lose one mechanic he became a fireman, so we lost him, and so we're looking for a new, we're happy for him, but unfortunately it put us under the gun a little bit. So Jim's gonna try to finish up putting all those GPS units on this week, so we should be able to start the evaluation of the program. Sawatch Labs is our strategic partner. They are a partner with Xcel, and we've hired them through a grant opportunity. We pay them first, and then when we're all done, they reimburse us for the total cost of the program. It's somewhere around $22,000, which we've already paid, or $23,000, I guess, and we've already made arrangements, paid that, and so we're working with them. The 90 days will be up right around July, and so we will get a report back from them. This report should be very interesting because we're doing 50 vehicles, and it's kind of a cross-section of all of our vehicles. We're not doing any equipment at this time. We have everything that we can think of as light trucks, cars, police cruisers, trash trucks, sweepers are all in this. We're looking at all of these things. So we'll look at those for 90 days. When we get the report back, the assessment actually looks at how often the vehicle's driven, how far it goes, what's the idling time on it. So, a lot of times these trucks have to idle because they also provide power from equipment. So we look at idling time, how often do they brake, what's their acceleration rates, all these kind of things that go into really assessing whether or not an electric vehicle is the appropriate vehicle for the work that it's doing. I believe that there's a ton of vehicles that we have. We have probably just under 400 vehicles and pieces of equipment in the city, and it continues to grow. That doesn't count like lawnmowers and things like that as well, that eventually we will want to bring into this program as well. But I think that once we get the report back, we'll be able to fully assess where do we need to go and what does this look like as far as a strategic way for us to replace vehicles in the future. Because we have to look at what our capital investment's been for vehicles that may be 2 years old, and are we really ready to move forward without those vehicles at this point and shift them to electric. So I think we have to be strategic in how we use the money to make sure we're getting the biggest bang for our buck, as Julie was talking about earlier, to make sure that we're just not throwing away good vehicles that still have a good purpose, or do they have residual value in the marketplace that we could sell them and then replace them with electric vehicles in the future? That's something we look at. That would probably go through the auction process, through government auctions, things like that. We're usually pretty successful in selling vehicles. Our vehicles aren't overused a lot. Some are, but most of them, I know I drove a Jeep the first year I was here that had 30,000 miles on it. It was a 2003 Jeep Liberty. I think we still have it in the fleet. So it's very interesting as we look through this to see, we have some vehicles that will last 20 to 25 years, and they're perfect for the job they do. And then we have other vehicles like our trash trucks that we try to replace every 5 years because they are very mechanically operated and the parts wear out very fast. They also, even though they get horrible gas mileage, their gas mileage can be cut in half within 5 years just because of wear and tear and the way that trash trucks are driven. They only go 3 miles an hour through the streets, and then they drive, 40 or 45 miles an hour out to the dump, and then they come back and then they do the same thing over and over again. So it wears them out pretty quickly. So we have to be thoughtful in the approach and how we look at what we're going to be replacing. So hopefully this we'll be ready to start that this week, and we'll get that report back. And then once that report comes back, not only will they tell us what vehicles they believe are prime to be replaced with EV or hybrids, or whether or not we should just keep what we have, because a lot of the diesel vehicles that are bigger pieces of equipment aren't quite ready yet in the marketplace. The other component of this will tell us what our infrastructure needs to look like. So if they say that, I'm just throwing numbers out, say we're going to get 30 vehicles in the next 5 years that are going to be electric, where do we have to put the infrastructure and put in the electric charging stations? We have several locations. We have the water plant, wastewater plant, M&O, recreation center, the new city hall, and I may be missing one or two buildings, but we would need infrastructure at each of those if we have electric vehicles there. The other thing that this report will tell us is, are there vehicles that will need to be charged midday? Are we going to exceed the capacity of those batteries within 1 day of operation? And those are vehicles sometimes when we're out doing something like jetting or with a vehicle that needs to have that equipment on, will that battery run down during the course of the day, and would we have to do a midday charge? That would not be very efficient for us to get our work done, so we have to think about how we do that as well. The other thing is that when we put the infrastructure in, we have to make sure we have enough infrastructure that we're charging all of our vehicles that need to operate on a daily basis overnight because of the time that it takes to charge. It's not, we can't just go to the gas station and charge a vehicle in 5 minutes like you can go fill up a tank of gas or with our diesel pumps out there. So we have to be very thoughtful in our process as to how we're going to use these vehicles to make sure that we don't hamstring ourselves in being able to get the work done or not be able to respond to an emergency water main break or sewer line break or something like that. We want to make sure that we're always prepared to go out and do those type of things. So I think it's a great program, and Sawatch Labs has been very, very easy to work with. And I think they're very excited. They're an Excel partner, so I think that makes it exciting for them as well. So once we get done with that, I'm looking forward to seeing on the list of vehicles of what we have, of how many they come back with to see. I did an estimate prior to doing this, and I thought we had probably about 60% of our vehicles that at some point in the next 5 to 10 years could all be electric or hybrids, just going through and looking at the type of work that they do. So I'm kind of interested for my own edification to find out, was I right, So really, I think most of the information about this is in the packet, but I would love to answer any questions that you might have about going forward on this.
So I have a couple real quick. I'm a new owner of an electric vehicle, and that is a very different world to live in, like really, and it has changed my perspective on this in particular. The other thing is Saturday night I did a full 7-hour, 8-hour ride along with the swing shift sergeant. That's a lot. There's no way they could do that without trading in vehicles
Right.
and like tagging out and somehow like leaving that and going to do another one. They're just on the streets
Right.
the whole time. The biggest question I have, so you had mentioned charging at night. That actually does connect to the sustainability piece because that's the optimal time
Absolutely.
to do that. So you
Right now it
can't-
is.
Yeah, so you can't just plug in midday.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest question when I look at this timeline is the GPS assessment, or whatever you're calling it, is starting now.
It is.
And it's missing the really cold temperatures. So what I've noticed about my vehicle is the cold
Oh,
temperatures
that's a good point.
bring the percent of power down so fast. And I wasn't anticipating that. That's not something they really say, like, hey, cold weather is
Right.
going to make a difference. It knocks it out so fast. I mean, I can go from 80% to 40 in half a day, and I'm not even driving it. It's just sitting
That's
in
a
my.
good point. I hadn't thought about that. I will ask Sawatch Labs if they have data on
Okay,
that. I
okay.
wonder if they have enough empirical data to know what
match,
what that amount is going to be on a regular basis, depending on the type of battery or vehicle that it
Okay.
is. So that's a good question. I'll ask
Okay.
them about that. Thank you.
That was my biggest question. I was like, oh, yay. Okay. Councilmember Malika.
Yeah, I think it's actually fantastic that you're gonna get not only information about which cars we could potentially switch out, but also that operational piece, which I think is, you know, the real world. How do we function, like Meredith was saying, with
Right.
with an EV, and how do we make it work with folks? You know, one of the things that I did have a quick question about is all of the like the operational piece information also going to be available in this report in July, or
Yes.
do we have to wait a little longer for that?
No, I think that the reason they take 2 weeks to compile all the data and report is
Oh,
I
okay.
think it's comprehensive when they give it back.
Okay.
I would imagine that we'll have questions and because it's a very new thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very interesting to see because I think in the time that we're doing this, the technology evolves, right? So by the time we get ready to implement, there may be some different technology out there for charging times or batteries or things like that. I hope there is because one of the things that we found out was we tried to order 3 Ford Lightnings this year for our fleet. And we were told that there's no way we're going to get them this year. We may not get them next year. The earliest may be late '23 or early '24. And the main reason for that is 90% of the vehicles that Ford is creating, these Lightnings, is going to the general public. So they're not 10% goes to fleet and government. And I think one of the reasons is I don't think they've quite designed the trucks for the type of usage that we have. As an example, we found out that the Ford Lightning will not take a utility box. So you can't put the toolboxes on the side because of how you have to mount those. It would hit the batteries. And so the only thing that you can do is kind of a slide out with a topper on it. And that doesn't really work for a lot of things because we have to throw things into the top. So I'm hoping that they're working on that. And maybe that's why they're not making so many available to fleet and government at this point, because I think they're more for just the general public to use as a regular pickup truck. But we're working with Ford. We work with, used to be Spradley Bar. I'm having a hard time remembering, Carf something now. I can't remember what they changed their name to, but I've known them as Spradley Bar for 40 years. So that Ford dealer, our Ford dealer, O'Mara, and also with Sil Tahar, we've been in touch with them to find out what is the availability, and they're all saying the same thing. There just are none available right now. I think Broomfield is getting one. How they got it, I don't know. But they're getting it from Spradley Bar or whatever they're called now. But they probably got an inside person or something. I don't know how they got it, but they are going to have one that we can go look at here in April. They will have one, so they're inviting a bunch of people up for like a come and see our electric vehicle thing. And then also on the equipment side, we're reaching out to our equipment providers like Ferris Equipment and Scorpion and them, and seeing what is the timeline, I guess, for some of these vehicles. Some of the vehicles that are coming out probably are not gonna do the job for us because of the cost right now. Like, I know there's one trash truck out there that's like $675,000. We're paying $310 for a Scorpion model truck right now. And the weight of these vehicles is so intense because of the batteries. They would exceed our weight limit that we have for the city streets. So that's some other things that I think have to be looked at in the industry before we can really go whole hog into this and really say, yeah, we're gonna have our entire fleet done within 20 years, say 2042. Our entire fleet, may be electric by then, but hopefully there will be enough advancement in the technology that we can move faster. I'd like to look at equipment like lawnmowers and things like that that can run on electricity, because I think then it's, that really saves a lot of time, because those are all gas powered or diesel or some type of a mixture of fuel. I think those would be ideal for us to look at next.
Yeah, no, I think that this is fantastic, and it will help the city make a better decision moving forward. One of the feedback I've gotten from a couple of my residents at my recent town halls has been, why is the city looking at going at EVs? You guys are just throwing money away, or you're is this politically motivated? And I feel like this information could really just help us look at the whole picture. And, the world is changing, and we must change too. And what does that look like for operationally as a city providing services to residents? So I'm really excited about this project.
One of the good things is I think prices are coming down. I know the F-150 is similar to a normal F-150 now. So that's a good sign.
Yeah.
I hope they are able to get the 250s and 350s, because we do have a lot of those in our fleet. They just do not have those yet that can provide the power that we need to run some of the equipment that's on some of these vehicles.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank the staff that put together this report. I know it's always like a team effort, so appreciate the effort. The question I have, and it might not even be for anybody who is here right now, but we as a city council approved in the budget for this year to purchase some electric vehicles. I believe it was for the police department. And so, in reading your description about how you aren't going to be able to get a hold of these pickup trucks this year, I was just curious if we had actually managed to purchase any electric vehicles, or if we know if they've been ordered, or anything like that. So I don't know who could answer that question.
The vehicles that we ordered for the police department are actually hybrids.
Oh.
There are 6 cruisers, I believe, that we ordered. I worked with Heidi Waltz to get those ordered, and they are on order, and we will get 6 hybrids this year that will be used for patrol and for, I think they call them pursuit cars. So we are
Okay, well,
getting
that answers my
those.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know I have a hybrid, and you get you save the best, or use the least gas, and are using electricity mostly when you're doing the, like city driving, the lower speed limits. So I think that would be probably a really good deal for police cars, for
Yeah,
patrol
I think
cars.
the hybrids are very good for police cars because of the number of hours that they idle. So I think that helps, because they can run on the electric and instead of the gas when they're idling. So, yeah, but we do have 6 of those coming. I think Heidi thinks that they'll be wonderful, because they do have really good pickup speed and all those kind of things. So, but the electric vehicles that were approved were actually the Ford Lightnings for the Parks Department. However, they're not available. So we decided to put that purchase off for this year and see if we can wait till next year and see if they're more available. At some point, though, we will have to get some vehicles, because there are replacement vehicles for vehicles that should be replaced this year, but we're going to try to get another year out of them.
All right, well, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
My mouse is being silly too now that I ditched Cammie. I don't know if this is for you, Rob, or if it's actually for Heather. How many cars do we have that are not PD related, not M&O, large, large equipment or lawnmowers and stuff like that? I guess I'm asking the cars that employees drive for the city of Northglenn.
How many cars do we, like just regular
Yeah.
like sedans?
Yeah.
Got that number.
I think I might be able to answer that. We're gonna evaluate 5 sedans, but I think we have a total of 12 in the fleet. I have to double check that, but one of them is used as a car that we just transfer people back and forth to get cars out to the shop. And then we have we have 2 vehicles out there that are hybrids. One I think used to be the city manager's car that we use as a hybrid now, and I think that Kent's department and Engineering uses that just to go to meetings and to go to different things. So I think we do have 12 sedans out there. I think 3 or 4 are hybrids, the rest are gas powered.
So are we looking at those in this study too?
Yes, there's 5 sedans that we're looking at that we selected based on age, miles, and the usage. When we looked at them, we wanted to try to get a good cross-section of all those and how they're being used. So we'll look at 5 of them during this survey.
And how long do those cars last?
That's a good question. We haven't gotten rid of any yet, except for the one that got damaged by hail. And we call it the golf ball because it still looks like a golf
They
ball.
usually last pretty long.
Yeah, I think they probably last at least 9 or 10 years because they're hybrids. The batteries don't wear out as fast.
Right.
So I think they last a little longer. But I don't think we've gotten rid of a hybrid yet. Do you know, Brooke, if we have? I don't think we have. So I think, do you know how old those are? I think like 10?
I want to say 2005 or 6.
Yeah, so
I'm
we've
sorry,
had-
Pretty good.
2014.
2014. So some have been around 7, 8 years probably. And
Okay.
they're still doing good.
And that
Okay.
manager car, just to clarify, isn't my car. That's a shared pooled car. Yeah, that
Yeah.
for the city manager's office area.
I understand that. Thank you for your information. It was very valuable.
I don't see any more questions. Yes, thank you. That was,
Thank
I'm
you.
excited about this. I can't wait to get the
I want to see the data when it comes in. That'll be good.
Yeah, I hope
Thank
you're
you.
right.
Good to see all of you. Thank you.
Okay, our fourth and final item, City Council Ward 3 vacancy process. Joanna, our city clerk, what do you have for us tonight?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. So I am here to provide additional information regarding filling the upcoming Ward 3 council vacancy. At the March 14th regular council meeting, staff presented a proposed timeline for filling the vacancy with an application and appointment process. And at that meeting, council had questions regarding calling a special election and the cost of a special election. So in lieu of walking through the 3-page memorandum and the attachments that are provided in the packet, I'd like to give just a brief recap on the item and then address the questions and the feedback that staff received at the March 14th meeting. So to recap, the opportunity for council to select an applicant to fill the vacancy by appointment until the next regular election is specifically provided in the city charter and in the municipal code. And so to reiterate that, I know you've heard this before, but section 3.8 of the city charter states that within 30 days after a vacancy occurs, the remaining council members shall appoint by majority vote a duly qualified person to fill such vacancy who shall serve only until the next regular municipal election. So in this case, the person appointed to fill the vacancy would serve until the November 2023 regular election. The application process for a vacancy contemplated by the municipal code includes a required city notice that's given to the public, and that's to communicate the opportunity to provide written applications for the vacancy, and it's intended to provide a pool of applicants that council may choose to interview. So historically, application processes have yielded several residents who have expressed their interest in being appointed to council. And the most recent ones include the Ward 4 vacancy in June of 2021. We had 9 residents apply for the vacancy at that time. The Ward 1 vacancy in December of 2019, there were 8 applicants. And then the Ward 4 vacancy in June of 2019, the city received a total of 16 applicants at that time. However, if council cannot make an appointment from the applications that are received, and that would, for example, be due to a tie vote, then the charter requires council to call a special election at the next regular council meeting. And that would be following the 30-day appointment period to fill the vacancy. So jumping into the questions and feedback that were received at the March 14th meeting, I'm just going to quickly run through these. One of the questions was, can the applicants be notified that they may submit community support letters or letters of recommendation? And on the very last page of the packet materials is a copy of the application that staff would use. And so we've just updated the language. It's about a third of the way down on the page under the supplemental information to include the community support letters and letters of recommendation as other examples for folks to know what they might be able to include if they desire to. We received feedback that council would like to review the interview questions, which is great. That will be scheduled for a council meeting that's closer to when those interviews occur, and that will be based on council's preferred timeline. Staff received a question regarding if the interviews are held on April 18th, would Councilmember Duran-Mullica participate in the interviews? And so that's a question for council to answer. One thing that may affect that question is that staff has provided an alternative application and interview schedule in the packet. It's included as attachment 2. And so that's there to consider if council prefers to hold interviews at a later date than was initially suggested by staff. We received a question about how the timing of a special election would work, which actually impacts the cost of the special election. So I'll run down that information really quick here. So the city charter provides the 30-day period in which council shall appoint a qualified person to fill the vacancy. As I mentioned earlier, if an appointment cannot be made, then council would need to call a special election at the next regular council meeting, which would be on May 23rd. The charter requires that the special election be held no later than 75 days from the date that the special election is called, which in this case would be no later than Saturday, August 6th. And so due to other timing requirements that are found in the election codes, staff, if the special election is called, staff would recommend the date of Tuesday, August 2nd as the date for the special election. And with a typical election cycle, we usually have between like 120 to 100 days to work with. So in order to comply with the 75-day timeframe that the charter requires, we would need to come back and ask council to adopt a compressed election schedule. And that could be accomplished at the same time in the same ordinance as when council needs to call that special election in May. It would just be something different. And to give an example, in a normal general election for the city, candidates have a 20-day period to circulate nomination petitions, and they can start circulating those 91 days prior to the election, and then they need to be filed with the clerk no later than 71 days prior to the election. So obviously, in a 75-day cycle, you're not working with 91 days prior, so we would compress those time periods. So then what would the special election cost? The short answer is approximately $37,000. And so how we came to that figure is the city usually participates in coordinated elections that are run by the county. Unfortunately, this year, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the county will be conducting both the primary election on June 28th and then the general election in November. And so with the primary election, the county closes out that election on July 30th. So then the turnaround and prep time for a special election 2 days later for the city of Northglenn just isn't feasible. So, which is fine. We wouldn't be able to use their election equipment because that would be tied up in their processes. They would be able to provide us with voter registration lists and any guidance that they're able to. But the city would be running the election ourselves. So totally doable, it just impacts the cost. So let's see here. We received information from 6 different municipalities that have either conducted a special election relatively recently or have provided information on what they anticipate the cost would be. As I was looking at the figures, it ranges between about $3 per voter up to about $5.90 per voter. So our estimate at about $37,000 comes out to be, I think it was $5.33 per voter. So I think it's fairly in line. One thing that we heard was cities have said that their costs have been affected by a paper supply. Hopefully that will regulate itself, if we need to call a special election. Other cities that have not been able to coordinate their elections with the counties have also contracted with election specialists, consultants, if you will, to help them if they have issues with staff resources or if they need assistance using somebody else's equipment or what have you. That cost is not included in our estimate. We would look at that later when we need to call that special election. So staff actually has 2 more questions for council. As council moves into discussing this item, those questions are, is there consensus among council for staff to proceed with the application and interview process to fill the upcoming vacancy? And then if so, which schedule does council prefer? So if you take a look at the two attachments in the packet, you'll notice some green shading. That's probably the easiest way to look at those because the items shaded in green reflect the time commitment from council. So schedule number 1, which is also attachment number 1, has council interviewing applicants on Monday, April 18th, and then appointing a new member to fill the vacancy as early as April 25th. On the alternative schedule, which is attachment 2, it has council interviewing applicants on Monday, May 2nd, and then council could appoint a new member as early as May 9th. And then, I don't think I mentioned this yet, but the deadline again to fill that vacancy is May 21st. So I am happy to answer questions or whatever you have.
Councilmember Brown.
Joanna, the last time that we did this for Ward 4, I think it was, or it may have been when we did Ward 1, the interviews took so long and it seemed unfair to keep some candidates there. I think we went all the way to 11 o'clock with Ward 1 because there were so many people. Is there an option to, if we get that many people who go through the interview process, can we then talk about splitting it into 2 days rather than having candidates out in the hallway or whatever for many hours or waiting for their turn?
Absolutely. That works easier with schedule number 2. You'll notice in schedule number 1, it has a very quick turnaround between the deadline to receive the applications. It has us receiving those applications up until Friday, April 15th, and then turning around and council interviews those applicants on Monday, April 18th. It's still doable. Residents have generally been very flexible when it comes to these processes. But it is a tight turnaround. There's more time in Schedule 2 between the deadline to submit applications and then council interviewing the applicants.
That makes sense. And then when you were talking about Councilmember Duran Mullica, would she then, if we look, Julie, hi Julie, love your hair. Would she then be voting also? Would she be allowed to vote, or is that a council thing where we decide?
So Councilmember Duran Mullica would not be voting on the replacement. So even with schedule number 1, the vacancy created by her resignation takes effect on April 21st. And so the earliest time that council has to appoint a new member would be at that regular meeting following that on April 25th. So she would be off of council at that point. So there would be 8 members voting on a replacement.
Since we're meeting the deadline with the second timeline, I would prefer that one for a couple of reasons. One is I don't know if it's just me, but I don't want to confuse our residents with the CCPP board applications running at the same time. So I don't know if that's just in my brain. I'm going to be like, what are people applying for? Like, this is crazy because there's an at-large opening, there's a Ward 2 opening, and then the Ward 3 seat on council is very different. So I want to make sure that our communication is super clear with all of these applications since they're all kind of circulating at the same time. But if we delay the council one a little bit, it puts a little space in between, if that makes sense. So that was just something I was thinking. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. I was actually going to say that, first of all, that I agree with you, Mayor. I prefer the second one. And nobody has said so far, but I also want to make clear that I wouldn't support a special election on this. It seems like the last 4 times we've had to replace someone, we did this interview process and appointed someone. And I don't think there's any, I haven't heard any reason or need or see any need to change that and spend a bunch of money to go through a special election process, or we probably would get such a tiny majority or tiny percentage of our residents actually voting, because that's what happens, normally in these special elections. So I do support the appointment process and the May dates.
Councilmember Whitcovett.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I said something this evening. I agree with what you've said, Mayor, about all the different applications going on and what Councilmember Brown mentioned about the flexibility to split the interviews because, you know, a lot of us have gone through really late nights and it's just not good for us and not fair to the candidates. So I would definitely support the second schedule. Thanks.
Councilmember Lukman-Hiramasa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I suppose I should also say something this evening. I just want to echo that. I also agree that that's probably the best way to proceed. The second timeline, giving people a little bit more chance to know that there's not an opening in an application process. And as the mayor said, we do have a lot going on with CCPP, so I actually think that's very wise.
Councilmember Brown.
I support both those initiatives. Doing the interviews as long as, well, you know, guess we'll have to see how many people actually apply. And for us to be able to appoint with the caveat that, you know, I do really want to look at those questions again. And then I wanted to ask Joanna, I'm looking at the one schedule. Did postcards go out today?
No, so we put a pause on the postcards so that we could get more feedback from council tonight regarding a preferred schedule. So if council prefers to go with the schedule number 2, communication staff will work on getting those postcards ready to be sent out, I would say more likely the beginning of next week.
And the notification that goes in the Thornton Sentinel, is that just a small notification or do we get to choose, you know, like size or whatever?
We could choose to advertise it differently. Previously, it's just been in the, you know, the government section that's in the back classified area that folks go to look for their ordinance adoption notices and all of the things that I know they read. But that's, if council would like us to look at putting it more of like an advertisement in the front section of the newspaper, we could do both, I would say, just to cover the bases.
That's something that I'm interested in, but not if my fellow council people are not. Thank you, Joanna.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Thank you. I'm in favor of appointing a new city council member, just for the fact of having a quorum at the earliest possible date. Moving forward, having 9 members. I'm in favor of that route.
Okay. Do you want to do sooner than later?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm on board for schedule number 2 because I think it provides us the greatest amount of time to be able to provide enough communications to our Ward 3 residents and really get the word out about the opportunity and hopefully build out a really awesome and large candidate pool. Thank you.
Councilmember Walker, did you want to weigh in?
I would be in support of the election process to let the people speak. But if we do end up going the route of the appointing process, I'd be in favor of it.
Well, I heard more support for the application process. Councilmember Walker, I totally understand the need and the residents' input. I think one reason that I am okay with the application process is because it's a short term. I mean, I think it's like maybe 18 months, so it's not a full term. And having participated in the application process a number of times, I feel like we really, council has done a pretty thorough job of running a process that was fair. And so I'm hearing more support for the application process, and I did hear more support for Schedule 2.
Sounds great.
That's what I heard. Great, and then we're gonna look at the questions. Thanks, Corey, for popping in. I saw you. Well, that is the end of our study session. Good to see you. Okay.
Likewise.
Well, we are adjourned. Have a great night.